Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Breber, and alongside me is Logan Camden, one of the few insane men in America who in a down regular season for the Kansas City Chiefs, with perhaps their most questionable group of weapons yet, looking more human than they ever had, still picked them to win the Super Bowl before the postseason started because of his undying faith in one man. As he would say, WHPM, we have Patrick Mahomes, and oh my goodness, if Mahomes didn't get it done in perhaps the moment of his career so far, the final drive in regulation, and then what he did in overtime to bring the Chiefs a Super Bowl victory in one of the best Super Bowls, certainly in recent memory, I would argue ever. Logan, I tweeted out earlier that we were going to discuss if Patrick Mahomes has the largest gonads in the history of mankind. Does he?
Brock Purdy's got some pretty large gonads, but I do think Patrick Mahomes... Mahomes probably does have the largest gonads, man. That was the biggest reason why they won this football game, man. Carson, Patrick Mahomes has immortalized himself as a football legend at this point already in his career. He is a part of, I think the Mount Rushmore of NFL quarterbacks in NFL history, and potentially the Mount Rushmore of just NFL players, point blank period. You talk about the game-winning drive in overtime, the game-tying drive in regulation. I mean, this is where legends are made. This is where guys are immortalized forever on the biggest stage in football, in the Super Bowl, right? We can talk about all the accomplishments, all the things these guys do game to game, play to play. The Super Bowl is where the chips are down and where memories are ultimately made. Tom Brady had two of these moments, right, where Adam Vinatieri leads him through, kicks the field goal. He's got the greatest comeback in football history on the biggest stage with 28-3, and this is another one of those classic football moments that puts you a part of that elite group, man. Mahomes and the Chiefs are 7-0 over the last two postseasons. They are the first team to win back-to-back Super Bowls since the 2003 and 2004 Patriots. He has a 13-1 touchdown-interception ratio over the past two postseasons. He's the first quarterback, Carson, ever. This is ridiculous. This is the stat that I think really hammers home how ridiculous Patrick Mahomes' start to his career is. He's the first quarterback ever to start in 4 Super Bowls before turning 30, and obviously because of that, he's the only quarterback to win 3 before turning 30. He's got the most playoff wins by any quarterback in a 6-year span. And you're right, Carson. There was a lot of skepticism around this team with injuries, with guys going out late, with receiver mishaps and offensive miscommunications, and a really bad back half of the season. Carson, Patrick Mahomes posted his career high in turnovers this season with 17. He posted his worst record as a starting quarterback, going 11-6. And yet there's just this feel, this inevitability. Carson, on that final possession that the Niners had in overtime, it felt like if Brock Purdy and them do not put this ball in the end zone and they give this man an opportunity to win the game, that's what he's going to do. He's the grim freaking reaper of the NFL, man. He has assumed the position that Tom Brady held for so long, where if you give him 2 minutes, if you give him a minute 30, it doesn't matter. If you give him time on the clock, point blank period, he is going to make something happen. He is Thanos, man. And it's just... It's so weird. I talk about the moments. I talk about the accomplishments. Now he is a part of just one of 5 quarterbacks to win 3 Super Bowls. Brady, Bradshaw, Montana, Aikman. He's 15-3 in 18 career playoff games. And he just plays by a different set of rules.
Yeah.
Carson, that's my conclusion is, we can talk about legacy, how he's been immortalized. Patrick Mahomes is simply just better when his back is against the wall, when the pressure is on, when the chips are down, when the clock is ticking down. He is at his best when he's stressed, when in these up-tempo rhythm late-game situations, when his back against the wall. When his back is against the wall, Patrick Mahomes fights like a caged animal, a caged beast, and he's going to get the job done, man. He's the biggest... The defense deserves a lot of credit for what they did in this football game. They deserve an immense amount of credit. But the guy that got them over the finish line, the guy that put the nail in the coffin, was the Grim Reaper, Patrick Mahomes.
He's the best football player I've ever seen, and I'm not proclaiming him the GOAT yet, but I think that if he's not in your top 2, you need to explain your criteria to me, because that would be like saying that Michael Jordan retiring after the first three-peat couldn't be in those conversations because of longevity. No, when a guy is just clearly the best to ever do it, has reached the highest peak, doesn't matter if other guys sustained really good production for longer. You can't tell me that if Mahomes retired today, you'd be like, yeah, I think that Peyton deserves to be above him. I think that I've got Johnny U or Joe Montana above him. It just doesn't make sense. He does things that nobody else in the history of the sport has been capable of. And I would call him the great equalizer, but that would honestly be selling him short, because no matter what he is up against, he is somehow always going to tip the scales, not just to a point where they're equal, in Kansas City's favor. He is going to put you over the top. And you mentioned, Logan, the inevitability that it felt like there still was for those Mahomes clutch drives in this game shouldn't have been possible. Would it be possible with any other player in football history to me? Even Brady, who of course has delivered more big moments in big games over the course of a career than anybody ever. But I just don't think when you're talking about this level of adverse circumstances in terms of the talent around him, being at this sort of talent deficit, there's just a different level of creation, of magical things just on the back of sheer athleticism that Mahomes can do. But they were really struggling early in this game. They were overwhelmed at the line of scrimmage. And shout out to Steve Wilks. He was disguising coverages well. I thought that he called a great first half in this game. And it just felt like the Niners were totally in control. The Chiefs were falling behind the sticks. You have some runs up the middle that get stuffed. You have a Mahomes sack. You have the two situations where on 2nd and long after a negative play, they just run these very simple receiver and tight end screens that are totally blown up. There's no other player who could be in that situation, and I would still have the faith to say, yeah, I think that somehow, even though this other team is clearly more talented and look way better, that you are still going to find a way to win. But that's just the Mahomes factor. And when it came down to those two clutch drives, he had big moments before that. I thought just keeping them in the game, down 10-3, he has that huge scramble on 3rd and 4 where he takes that contact and he just goes through a couple of defenders. And then he has the read option, big gain to at least get them into scoring position. They needed something at that point. But really, when it came to that fourth quarter, first of all, he actually marched them down the field easily for the first time all game. But then when they're down 3, he comes up with just consistent, methodical offense. He was just surgical, just picking apart those soft zone looks, gets them in scoring position. And then overtime was special. Overtime was maybe the most impressive drive of Mahomes' career, and that is really saying something. You have, of course, the early 4th down. How insane would it be, Logan, with basically any other player in NFL history to say, 4th down, yeah, I think that we're going to line up in the shotgun here. And if we did anything else, you would say, you're idiots. Like, why would you ever not put the ball in the hands of your quarterback out of shotgun and give him the opportunity to make a play in space? Andy Reid, I thought, maybe had a couple of rough moments early in this game, but I thought that he was brilliant down the stretch. But at the end of the day, that's Mahomes making a play. Kelsey's covered. He easily scrambles for the first there. Then he has to overcome what he's been having to overcome all year, which is boneheaded plays for his receivers, who I don't want to rag on over the totality of this game, but my God, MVS, what the hell is wrong with you? Could have had a gain of 5 or 6. Instead, after that first wrap, spins out, loses 4 yards. So now you're again behind the sticks, and he has that big 3rd down conversion to Rashee Rice. Then he has the huge scramble on the subsequent 3rd and 1 for 15 yards. Like, he just did whatever it took, man. Whatever it took. And I do think that the use of his legs is really a special testament to that. 66 yards on the ground today, on top of 333 through the air and 2 touchdowns. Yes, the defense was remarkable, and this isn't the most explosive performance from the Chiefs offense that we've ever seen, far from it. But in terms of individual quarterback performances, this has to be up there in those all-time conversations.
Oh, 100%. I think it has to be. I mean, the level of control that Mahomes exerted. And look, man, people are going to, if people want to hate on Mahomes from this game, it will be because they overblow the interception. And I do want to say
if you hate on Mahomes for this game, then you are not worth engaging in a conversation.
True.
That was superhero stuff.
And it's got to be such a gut-wrenching, like, I mean, heart out of your chest kind of game feel for the 49ers, because they played this game as perfectly as you can play against Mahomes. All of the stops in the red zone. Like, credit for Mahomes for getting the team down there. Credit for him for that big shot play early in the first quarter where they squander a red zone possession because of a Pacheco fumble. I mean, the Niners hemmed him up really well. Stifled them completely in the red zone. I mean, guys, their only touchdown in regulation comes off of a muffed punt. Without that muffed punt, the Niners probably win this football game. I mean, they were getting down there, but they weren't able to, actually punch it in. And then finally, when the Niners defense is tired, they think that they're going to get off the field. They muff the punt. Boom. Right after that, Mahomes gets into the end zone. it just has to be demoralizing, man, because the Niners played as perfect a game I can remember. It's like the Bills, man. That's how this feels, Carson, is them losing that 13-second game. But this is one of the greatest QB performances ever. And statistically, you may not look at it where you go, oh, he didn't have 4 TDs or whatever.
Yeah.
That's the thing that we're trying to get across. Like, when we're making these statistic cases, it's like Lamar's level of control that we've discussed throughout the season. Lamar just controls the game. Mahomes controlled the game, and he did enough in every scenario, right? That's something that I think we need to hammer home, is that, no, they didn't get a TD on every drive, and no, they weren't perfect in the red zone, but they consistently moved the ball, they consistently got points, Mahomes consistently made plays in crucial spots, and that's not something that I can say for the quarterback that was opposite him, Brock Purdy. Carson, that was a key for you for coming into this game, and again, that's a blanket statement you could make for any football game, but it was the Chiefs executing in the red zone, and they didn't. The Niners did a phenomenal job of defending them in the red zone. And if there was a guy that left meat on the, food on the plate, meat on the bone, it was Brock Purdy leaving his own team short. Like, Mahomes didn't put the ball in the end zone every single drive, but he methodically moved it, and he kept the Chiefs getting points that were crucial to them finishing this thing off, man. I think it is one of the, like you said, dude, with the circumstances, with an all-pro guard out, with all the immense pressure that the Niners were getting home, with all the times that they got stonewalled in the red zone, Mahomes just overcame and did it. It truly is one of the greatest Super Bowl performances that I can remember by a quarterback, especially considering the final 2 drives.
Yeah, he's the only guy ever to have 330 passing yards and 60 rushing yards in the same game. And last year, I thought that he was so clean. I thought that he was basically flawless in the Super Bowl against the Eagles. And maybe he wasn't flawless in this one because things were a little bit slow to start. And he wasn't able to just totally negate pressure throughout that first half. And he does force the one ball, understandably so, because things were going south. But that was still a bad pick that he threw. But when you are talking about clutch playmaking, back against the wall, what can you do? Just delivered over and over and over again. And the Niners' biggest shortcoming in this game was just not landing that knockout punch. They never landed that knockout punch. And then you give the sliver of opportunity with that fumble in the red zone, and boom, Mahomes cashes in. Now you've given him what he needs to get a touchdown. And you give him 2 minutes to work with in regulation, and boom, he gets the points that he needs. You miss the extra point, right? And then that leaves the door open for him. He doesn't need a touchdown now. Overtime, you only get 3. Like, that's the thing. There's not really much to criticize about this Niners performance. And I do want to say specifically about Brock Purdy. I know that you said that maybe he didn't play make at the level that a Mahomes did. He was good in this game, man. His greatest sin in this game, like many before him, was just not being Patrick Mahomes. Like, I thought this was clearly the best game that Purdy played in this postseason. He did not have the killer mistake. It looked for a moment like maybe he did on that 3rd and 13 in overtime, but then it turns out there was a hole downfield, and then he led a big nuts drive, dude. He led a big nuts drive. Getting that ball out to Christian McCaffrey on 3rd and 2 when he was under a bunch of pressure. Of course, CMC makes the special play, but that was impressive. Really nice throw on the run to Juszczyk. Like, it didn't feel to me like there were many moments at all in this game where I looked out and I thought, Brock Purdy doesn't belong on this field. I thought that he played a good game. Now, I did think there were some things where it's like, okay, yeah, he's not on that elite level. I thought that Spags was able to dial up some blitz that really disrupted him. And you see that kind of, it's the game-saving play for the Chiefs. They're able to get that blitz on 3rd down. Juwan Jennings wins his route. It doesn't matter. Purdy just can't hold on to the ball long enough. There were a couple other big 3rd downs. And there was a stretch in the early second half where he was out of rhythm, and he was throwing into traffic a lot, and it got a little bit dicey. But he came out making really nice throws over the middle of the field, moving the ball easily in that first quarter. And in overtime, I mean, he mostly did all you could ask, dude. We talked about how if you're going to win the Super Bowl, no matter how good your team is, you're going to need your quarterback to make those couple special plays.
Yeah.
And Brock was really close to doing that, man. And maybe if it wasn't Patrick Mahomes on the opposite side of the field, it would have been enough. But a field goal just wasn't enough.
It wasn't. And the only reason I say that is I do think Brock played a really good game against a great defense. I mean, again, considering the circumstances for Brock Purdy coming into this football game, I'm assuming you guys saw some of this on the broadcast, but lowest drafted player ever to start at quarterback in a Super Bowl. Obviously, we've had undrafted quarterbacks a la Kurt Warner, but he is the lowest drafted QB ever to start in a Super Bowl, Mr. Irrelevant. He's the 3rd youngest quarterback to ever start in a Super Bowl. Dan Marino, Ben Roethlisberger. And considering the play of those two guys, Marino isn't able to complete the game. Big Ben does not play a great game. This is the best performance by a young quarterback, in my opinion, on the big stage. Like, this is Brock does belong, and Brock is a good quarterback, and Brock played a good game. And all I'm saying is that there are just these few plays that make the difference. One play, I believe it's a corner throw to Ayuk, where there's a wide open receiver cutting across the middle. And I'm sitting there going, just take the check down, Brock. Like, I want to give Brock a lot of credit, because I have been a guy who is, I've gone against the grain on Brock. He's a very polarizing player. You either think he's the GOAT, he's the best quarterback in the league, or you think Brock Purdy's dog water. I think Brock is a very good quarterback, and I called him average, and I thought he was overwhelmed. There are things that I think Brock does really well on the football field, but there were just marginal errors where he let me down, where I think he tried to do too much on a certain play. But that really is the difference. Chris Jones bears down on him on a play on a crucial third down. They get a defensive back blitz in his face and throws off the rhythm, and that's the difference. It's kind of the same thing with the defense, Carson. I thought this 49ers defense played an immaculate game. The pressure they were able to exert on Patrick Mahomes throughout this game. And if Dre Greenlaw, who doesn't injure himself in that's one of the strangest injuries I've ever seen, man, to blow your Achilles out running onto the field. And you can tell they're just fired up. The team is just ready to go, man. They're excited to get on the field. Maybe that makes the marginal difference in this game. You got Fred Warner and the boys flying around the field making plays. And to me, Carson, the difference in this game for the Niners defense, because they did everything right. Pressure. They got the turnover. Like, all the boxes that you check to beat Mahomes. In the red zone, how they stopped him. I thought the biggest difference wasn't even the play of the players. I don't want to pick on him because I thought he came up with a great game plan. But Steve Wilks, to me, is the guy that I point the finger at. And the only reason I do that is because consistently, all game long, they are getting pressure with 3 and 4 guys. And in these big moments, these third down scenarios, Wilks says, we're going to bring the house. We're going to bring the pressure with 5 to 7 guys. To me, it's like, no, that's the exact wrong play call in this scenario. Mahomes is one of the best quarterbacks. He sees 6 or 7 guys, and he goes, Troy Aikman was saying this on, I think, Russillo's pod, but he was like, the difference between good and great quarterbacks is they know the situation. They know what plays they need to make. And in those scenarios, when you see 6 or 7 guys bearing down on you, you know, oh, there's a guy open, and I got to get rid of the ball. And in those scenarios, Mahomes was surgical. When he picked up the blitz, it was over, and I thought that was the difference, that Steve Wilks was a little too gung-ho. I know that you want to make a play. I know that you want to get that big hit and seal the deal. I thought he was a little too gung-ho in those third down, fourth down situations, bringing the house, when he should have dropped a few more guys in coverage and tried to blanket the field.
The one that stands out is the third down in overtime where Mahomes finds Rashee Rice, and you could see the blitz was coming the whole way. I thought in the first half, actually, they were able to get a lot of pressure with 4, but it really does come down to those little situational things. And I will say, you talk about that quote from Aikman, the ability to diagnose and know exactly what you need in that situation. Brock played a really good game, and he made a couple of those awesome plays outside of structure, but that is true. Like, I thought that Mahomes held up much better against the blitz. I thought that there were a couple spots where Purdy was sped up and he wasn't able to succeed in those situations. I do think, though, what you clearly have to say after this game is that whenever you watch the Niners in a big game with Jimmy G, it felt like definitively you are not going to be able to overcome this. Like, he is going to do those 1 or 2 things that just cost you, if it's a back-breaking mistake or if it's just the fact that he can't go above and beyond, that he can't extend a play with his legs, that he doesn't have that sort of improvisational instinct as a thrower to make a big clutch play. And it didn't feel that way in this game with Brock Purdy. So I think that for the Niners is a win. That even though there were up and downs of this postseason run, he made big plays when you needed him against the Packers. He made a whole lot of big plays when you needed them against the Lions. And in this game, I thought that he stepped up and mostly delivered against an awesome defense. So yeah, I think it's still hard to win a Super Bowl with a Brock Purdy level guy at quarterback. And I think that you see that because you're right. The Niners were the more talented team, and they dominated the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball for a lot of this game, and they had the more overwhelming talent, and you still didn't win. A lot of that is just Patrick Mahomes is inevitable. He's the best football player ever. But if you have I don't even know if we can say a tier 1 guy, because maybe tier 1 is just Mahomes, but we'll say a tier 2 guy, then maybe you can still win that game. But Brock has certainly separated himself from the Tua Tagovailoas of the world, right? He's just able to do more with his creativity, with his athleticism, and frankly with his balls, because he doesn't fear the moment. And I thought that he hung in the pocket. I thought that he delivered some throws from some condensed pockets in this game, and he put them in a position to win at the end of the day. But the Grim Reaper came through.
The Grim Reaper always does come through.
Always does.
Brock has a level of poise that has just astounded me through these first 2 years, man. He never really looks flustered the one game is the Baltimore game, and that's going to happen to anybody. It's the Keanu Reeves replacements quote. It's quicksand. You get those first turnovers, and you keep trying to dig and claw harder and harder, and that hole keeps pulling you down further and further. Brock, for the most part, doesn't blink, and I love that about him. Like, he never looks overwhelmed. He is a dog. And you can win a Super Bowl with Brock Purdy. Like, I do believe that. If it wasn't Mahomes, like you said, man, Carson, you can take any other quarterback on the planet, and this probably doesn't happen. I want to give a lot of credit to Brock. 33 total TDs in the regular season. That was the fifth most in the NFL. He led the NFL in QBR. 14-4 in the regular season this year. He was 7-0 as a starter in games he started and finished his rookie season. He's 21-4 in regular season games as a starter. Led the number one offense out in terms of yards per game. Like, he delivers balls on time accurately. He can operate and move decisively in the pocket. And I did think we saw his play extension. Like, he is a legitimately good playmaker when stuff breaks down. And he protects the football relatively well. Like, I love the level of control that Brock and how he sees the field. Romo said this a million times on the broadcast, and I'm not the biggest fan of Tony Romo, but I do agree. Brock's situational awareness and field awareness, I'll reference the play that you referenced earlier, the McCaffrey dump-off in the backfield. That's a split-second throw that you just have to know, my guy's there, I need to get this ball out right now, and he did it. And he's really good at that, but that is the difference between a Tier 2 guy and the best quarterback that I've ever seen with my own two eyes, man. Mahomes executed in those big spots, and Brock didn't. And that's not a knock on him. Like, Carson, this is one of the best games that I've ever seen a team put together against Patrick Mahomes. And it just didn't freaking matter.
Yeah, it was a really, really good performance from the Niners defense throughout. I did think, though, that the Chiefs defense was even more impressive, and that is always going to be probably throughout history. If I were to predict how things age when we think about this team, the unsung but major, really defining storyline of this team, because Mahomes is Mahomes. Mahomes has always been Mahomes. Maybe he is like the most sharp, veteran, smartest version of himself ever, but the difference maker is that this is a completely different defense than we have ever seen him have, and that's how you're able to overcome having the weakest offense that they've had throughout really this entire season. And I thought that there were so many dudes who made such spectacular plays. You have to just give a big old round of applause yet again to Spags, man. Is he the GOAT defensive coordinator?
Dude, Carson, he's the only coordinator, they said this on the broadcast in NFL history, to win 4 Super Bowls that's defensive or offensive. I think that points to two things with that stat. One, it's really hard for coordinators to stay in that role long enough. You know, again, you traditionally you win 1 or 2, you become a head coach. But I mean, he's done it to everybody. The fact that he did it to Brady, the fact that he has done it, I would consider him, with his track record, and with subpar defenses too, right? I mean, Spags has come up with great game plans for Chiefs defenses that weren't this dominant. And then you see, when you give him the requisite talent, they can have the best defense in football, point blank period. And I think that maybe is something that we overlooked. Their secondary played their asses off today, and they've been playing their asses off all year with L'Jarius Sneed, with Trent McDuffie, with everybody on this team. They made so many huge plays, Carson. So many massive pass breakups on all the skill talent. I mean, this secondary completely negated the elite skill position talent of the Niners. I'm trying to think off the top of my head other guys.
It has to be Spags. I think that you hit on the key point. It's like, if Bill Belichick had decided, hey, I want to be a defensive coordinator for life, of course he would have been the GOAT. We know what he did with those Giants defenses in the 80s and early 90s. Turns out he just wanted to be the greatest defensive coach, period, of all time, and one of the greatest GMs of all time and the greatest head coach of all time. But when you're talking about lifetime DCs, I honestly think that Spags is probably in a class of his own.
Let me shout out Buddy Ryan. I'll give Buddy Ryan some love, but I'm going to get my research team on that in a minute. But Spags, to me, is number one.
Everybody note that a shout-out has been given to Buddy Ryan, of course, great defensive coordinator and spent some time as a head coach as well, but also gave us Rex and Rob Ryan, which I guess is a bit more of a mixed bag. I thought Spags was huge, and again, it really is those differences on the margins, right? He was so good, as he always is, dialing up those blitzes on third down, and that made the difference because I thought that Purdy just wasn't able to deliver enough in those very specific situations. But the individual players too, man. There was a long stretch of this game where I thought, if the Chiefs win, the Super Bowl MVP has to come from this defense because they kept giving the ball back to the Niners quickly, and then they kept finding a way to deliver. If it was a timely takeaway on the first possession when they were kind of getting marched on, but more often it was just, getting good old-fashioned stops. But you mentioned the PBUs. Trent McDuffie potentially saved a couple of touchdowns in this game. He had the PBU early on that ball to Debo, huge play. Then he is the guy who brought the blitz on a couple of big third downs to force the ball out early. He had that huge tackle on George Kittle at the line of scrimmage on the final drive of regulation where the Niners, if he hadn't been there or if he had missed that tackle, would have gotten a first down, and maybe that becomes a touchdown situation where they at least eat more clock. And, of course, Chris Jones, I thought, was the other hero of this game, and maybe it doesn't show up on the stat sheet for either of these dudes. That's the thing with defense, Logan. You know what? I'm going to make this a TJ Watt conversation just very, very quickly, because the one thing that has bothered me about that conversation is everybody parading around stats, including interception return yards. They'll show the stat head graphic, and that'll be on it, and everything is lit up for TJ, and it's not lit up for Miles, and they say, how could you possibly have robbed this guy? This is true of defense in any sport. Baseline stats, the box score stats will never capture a guy's impact. I was thinking in the NBA, what if somebody looked at one year and said Theo Ratliff led the league in blocks, he was so robbed. There is so much that you do every single play to keep a guy from getting the ball who you're on. So there's no opportunity to register a stat, or just to contain the quarterback, right? To keep a guy inside the pocket. Just broadly, I think that there is an obvious truth that raw stats do not quantify defensive impact. And you see that in this game, because I thought that those guys were both masterful and neither of them register anything really impressive on the stat sheet. But Chris Jones changed this game. He had multiple huge pressures. He forced an overthrow on a potential touchdown to Deebo Samuel. He forced a throwaway on that third down. He is the guy who made the game-saving pressure at the end. Those two stand out to me, but I think this might be the best Super Bowl winning defense that we've seen since the Legion of Boom, Logan. The other one that I would consider, because I tweeted this out, and I already had the 2015 Broncos, the no-fly zone defense in my mind, but that's the one that everybody brought up. That's the only other contender to me. This defense was so consistently brilliant throughout the entire regular season. Elite unit in terms of generating pressure, elite coverage unit with an elite defensive play caller, good linebacker play. They were the number 2 scoring defense in the regular season, held opposing teams to 17 points per game. Nobody exploded on them all year. Nobody. And when it came to the playoffs, they held the Dolphins. Again, we can talk about the weather. We can talk about Tua folding. That offense that had averaged 30 points per game that we had been talking about. Oh my God.
Dropped
70. Are they the best since the greatest show on turf? Are they better? They scored 7 points. The Bills, they were able to move the ball some, but that was just spectacular Josh Allen performance. And in that second half, the Chiefs defense buttoned up, man. They shut down the run. They were fantastic in coverage. Against the Ravens, the Chiefs didn't score in the second half. That offense completely sputtered out. You held the Baltimore Ravens, their own flawed play calling be damned, another one of the most dynamic offenses in football, to 10 points. And then in this game, despite the fact that your offense is repeatedly giving the ball back to the Niners, you hold them in regulation to 19 points, and then you hold them to a field goal in overtime, in spite of a couple of really impressive plays from their offensive skill guys. What an unbelievable season from this unit. What do you think? Are they the best since Legion of Boom? Who else would you have up in that conversation with them?
I was going to say, we can do since 2000, two additional things before we get into that. I want to give another shout-out to a defensive coordinator. Dick LeBeau has to be on the short list, I think, of GOAT D coordinators. 2, stat correction. I said Mahomes was the only QB before 30 to win 3 Super Bowls. It's him and Brady. They're the only 2.
Bastard.
Couldn't
let Pat have this one.
For real, man. Can we let him have one?
Yeah.
Continuing the discussion, though, I think they're top 5 since 2000. And just looking at Super Bowl winning defenses, there's 5 I'd highlight. I think you are exactly right. The 2015 Broncos, the 2013 Seahawks, the 2008 Pittsburgh Steelers, the 2000 Baltimore Ravens. And then to me, it's this Chiefs team. And what is so unique about this Chiefs team that I think is just fundamentally different from the other ones is the style of football that we just play today. It's a lot freaking harder. You consider the rule changes, the aspect that I think a lot of people forget, Carson, the 2008 Pittsburgh Steelers changed the rules of football. James Harrison, Ryan Clark, Troy Polamalu, Lamar Woodley, point to anybody on that team. The Steelers were handing out concussions every single week. And so the NFL had to make a change to lighten up on the rules. So we have a fundamental difference there with rule changes and how much softer NFL rules have gotten. But there's also a change in the fact that the passing game is more prevalent than ever before. And that's what makes it so much harder to slow teams down. It's just so explosive, so volatile. And like you said, Carson, the fact that there was never a crack, there was never a break, there was never... I mean, just even individual explosive shot plays were rare against the Chiefs. For them to get burnt on an individual play-to-play basis, it's a testament to the talent of this team, the season that they've had, and the consistent game plan and brilliance of Steve Spagnuolo. And on a broader football kind of ideology and how they've constructed this team, I think the Chiefs did a great job of pivoting away from their old identity and leaning more heavily into this defensive side of football. All that they've invested in free agency and through the draft, accruing these players for Spags to use. Again, the identity of this team, we talked about this in our Super Bowl preview show, the identity of this team was explosive offense, crazy playmaking, shootouts, right? Remember the Rams 2018 Chiefs game? We got over 100 total points scored in that football game, right?
Yeah. That
was their old identity. And after they lose Tyreek Hill, they completely leaned into making this defense elite to pair up with this quarterback, to give them an elite running game, a more old-school style feel. And it's worked. It's paid off. 2 years where the Chiefs have been doubted the most, more than any other year. Oh, because they lost Tyreek, because they didn't have any weapons, and because their receiving room sucked this year. And their leading receiver, which is really remarkable, outside of Travis Kelce, their leading receiver was a rookie. And they still get it done because of how they reallocated their resources and built this team. It's just genius. And I think the Chiefs organization, top to bottom, deserves a lot of credit for that, man. It's an old-school style of winning games, but when you have the best quarterback on the field, you can do it. You can win football games like this, man. It's a real change of pace from years previous.
It's crazy. You just need enough because the defense is so elite, and that's exactly what I said, dude. It's like the Chiefs' offense isn't going to explode. They haven't exploded since Week 7 against the Chargers, but Mahomes is going to get you to 24-27, and with this defense, that's going to be all that you need. It's unbelievable. Truly a dominant unit. And listen, they are going to improve their set of offensive weapons. Like, they're going to invest there. But maintaining an elite defense and saying, all right, Pat, how much can you pick up the slack offensively so we don't have to pay a wide receiver $20-something million a year? Might not be a bad strategy long term. You know, continuing to invest in young guys, getting good, talented players on rookie contracts. I could see that paying off for them. Of course, the challenge is going to be when Kelce ages out. And I don't know if you could still say that he's in his prime. Like, I don't think that he's what he was 3 years ago, but he was still damn good in this game. And I think has to be up there for maybe the clutchest weapon ever. And that's the factor that we've talked about, man. In these big games, there's just such a connection there. There is such a knack, such a football instinct for him, an improvisational synergy with Mahomes where he's just going to find a way to get open. And I swear, on that final play of regulation or second to last play of regulation, I've never seen Travis Kelce move that fast in my life, bro. Oh my God, he was motoring. And I saw Next Gen Stats tweeted it's actually the fastest that he's moved in 7 seasons. But think about it. Last week against the Ravens, he has the 100-yard first half. This first half, he had 1 yard, and he ends the day with 9 catches for 93. Just so phenomenal when they needed it most. And Rasheed does need some credit here, dude.
Oh, yeah.
Because maybe he doesn't have like the totally shiny raw yardage total, but 6 catches, a lot of those really timely. I thought that Pacheco, again, maybe the efficiency for him isn't all that great on the ground, but I thought that it was important establishing some balance to this offense. I thought that he got involved in the screen game. Like, there were other dudes who stepped up on this Chiefs offense who deserve some credit.
Wholeheartedly. And I think the offensive line, the way they were able to withstand the stamina, I think you saw both of these defenses they were whooped at the end of this game.
Yeah.
These defenses were tired. And the fact that the Chiefs' offensive line, they got beat up in the first 3 quarters. I'm not going to paint it. I'm not going to paint a picture that wasn't there. The Chiefs
they missed Joe Thuney.
They missed Joe Thuney a lot. They were getting obliterated at the line of scrimmage. But as the game kept going on, man, the Niners just looked dogged, and the Chiefs hung up a little stronger. Shout out, Carson. I thought the exact same thing. I was like, holy hell, man. I didn't know Kelsey had that in the tank.
Yeah.
And that was a bit of a head-scratcher for me from Steve Wilks. The fact that the game is in the balance on that possession and you don't dedicate 2 guys to Travis Kelsey. You know what I mean? I know that we put that as a blanket statement, but to me, that was a mistake.
Yeah.
I am not isolating Travis Kelsey on the biggest play of the game on a crucial 3rd down. I'm putting 2 bodies on him. And so I do think that I think that those guys deserve a lot of credit too.
Get in on the action with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. New customers who deposit $5 or more can get a no-sweat bet up to $1,000 back in a bonus bet.
Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code NERDS. New customers can get a no-sweat bet up to $1,000 if your first bet loses. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code NERDS. The crown is yours. I also want to give credit to another guy who had a massive legacy game on the line for him in this one, and that's head coach Andy Reid. Carson, Andy Reid has climbed even more after the Super Bowl win. He is the 4th coach in NFL history to coach in 5 Super Bowls. That is just with Belichick, Don Shula, and Tom Landry. He's the 5th coach in NFL history to win 3 Super Bowls. That's Belichick, Knoll, Walsh, and Gibbs. He's 4th in career wins, 2nd in playoff wins. He's led Kansas City to double-digit wins in 10 of 11 of their seasons, and they've won the AFC West 8 straight times. Carson, and now he is definitively, him and Mahomes have the 2nd most wins of any head coach and quarterback tandem in NFL history, taking a lead over Chuck Noll and Terry Bradshaw. Belichick and Brady have the most with 30. Reid and Mahomes are at 15, and Noll and Bradshaw are at 14. It's insane, man. The Chiefs notched their 4th Super Bowl appearance in 5 seasons. They're the 3rd team ever. The 2014-18 Pats and the 90-93 Bills. It's a historic season for this team, for this dynasty, which I think we can officially call them now, that they have crowned themselves because they have 3 Super Bowls and they've done this consistently enough. And Andy Reid, I already considered probably as he was stamped as a top 5 coach heading into this game.
Yeah.
I think
Is he number 2? Is he number 2?
That's kind of the tough question, right? It's the stereotypical knock, and I hate being that guy that goes, "Oh, well, Belichick had Brady." Well, Don Shula had some great teams too.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say Don Shula had
David Woodley.
David Woodley, or
he had Bob Greasy.
And
Earl Morrall. Yeah,
Earl Morrall,
he was loaded.
And I was gonna say, I don't know if it's the same.
And that's the funny difference maker that we can point out, right? Is that Reid never got the Super Bowl with Mahomes. The one thing that I will come back to, I do think he's number 2. I would rank him as my 2nd greatest coach of all time for 2 reasons. In the best era of offense that we've seen in the NFL, Reid continued to get better, continued to trot out great offenses, did it with 2 different franchises that were in the mud, right? 1998 NFL Draft, the Philadelphia Eagles have the 2nd overall pick in the draft. They take Donovan McNabb, they get Andy Reid, their fortunes change. The Chiefs, down on their luck, 2-14. He revitalizes Alex Smith's career, brings this organization out of the gutter. They find Mahomes in the draft, and boom. To me, the fact that he has done this with 2 different organizations, that his teams have been so consistently great on offense. You know what, man? Head coaches and great quarterbacks, they go hand in hand. Noll and Bradshaw, Belichick and Brady, Reid and Mahomes. They need to lean on each other. They need each other. Great defenses going hand in hand. These are great teams. These are great franchises. These are great units. They all go hand in hand. But Reid to me is 2nd. What do you think, Carson?
So I think if we're talking post-merger, which I personally would like to do to make this question easier, shout out to Lombardi, shout out to George Hallis and Paula Brown and all those guys. He's got to be top 3. If you want to make the Shula argument, I'll hear it. But I think that when you are talking about the combination of ingenuity, of obviously team success and results, but also of longevity, it's just insane what he's accomplished. And He didn't have the Super Bowl before Mahomes, but oh my God, I mean, he still had a proven track record as one of the great offensive minds and play callers of all time. He took an Eagles team that won 3 games before he got there, and then within 2 years had them winning 11 and took them to 5 NFC title games. And Donovan McNabb was certainly good, but he's not like one of those elite top tier quarterbacks who you're talking about. Then he goes, by the way, he also revived Michael Vick, put out some really good teams with him. They were just consistently in the conversation, in the mix. Then he goes to Kansas City, a team that won 2 games, and they immediately win 11 games. And he revives Alex Smith's career that had kind of already started with Harbaugh, but Alex Smith was a bust, and then he was a Pro Bowl caliber quarterback for years, and the Chiefs were always damn good on offense. Then he takes Mahomes, who is the best ever do it, but at the time was a guy who some people thought going into the draft was a second-round talent because he played too much backyard football and because his mechanics were inconsistent and his footwork was sloppy. And I don't think you can deny that Andy Reid helped that guy become the best to ever do it. And even in this game, dude, like some of the play calls that he dials up, I mentioned on that 4th and 1 in overtime, the diversion of the motion, the running back in motion, and then you have the option for Mahomes to either go to Kelsey, moving with him in the flat, or to keep it himself. You have the play to win it all, which Mahomes himself said it was like corn dog, the other Super Bowl winning play, where you have the receiver go into motion and then cut back to the outside. Like, he just schemes dudes open, man. I mean, he's just so brilliant, and the body of work is obviously not unmatched because of Bill Belichick, but outside of that, I think that it holds up against anybody else. The other head coach in this game, Logan, I'm seeing catch some flack. What do you think? Does Kyle Shanahan bear responsibility here? What did you think of the game that he coached?
Quite the opposite. I think I would cut Kyle Shanahan a lot of slack. I thought this was a really well-coached game, and the one thing that I pointed to, I thought he got creative with his play calls. I thought he schemed up a good game plan. I thought they gave the one area where I thought that San Francisco faltered was not giving McCaffrey the ball more in early down situations. You talked about that lull earlier that we saw from Purdy in that second half, and I just thought that their game plan was a little wrong. I would have fed McCaffrey a little more, or I would have weaponized the short passing game, try to get McCaffrey in space, Debo in space. But I thought for the most part it was a great game plan. And what did I say coming into this game? The guy with the biggest monkey on his back in this football game was Kyle Shanahan, and he would have a special play in his back pocket. And we get the Jawan Jennings flip. I was waiting on it, man. I was waiting on it, Carson, for him to break it out, and I saw it coming, and that was a beautifully called play. I got scared because I thought Jennings was going to get licked in the backfield for how long it took to develop, but lateral to Jennings, boom, he throws the bomb, easy TD, classic little trick play. Considering that he broke that out, considering that, again, the Niners played a damn near flawless football game. Without a muff punt, I mean, with them getting in the end zone a couple of different times, I really can't put any of this loss on Kyle Shanahan. They took a lead in overtime. What more do you want him to do? Again, I think if you're Carson, we talk about this all the time on this show. The media, the sports fans, we love to do results-based thinking. So if he's the loser, it must all be Brock Purdy's fault. There must have been a big collapse, and Kyle Shanahan must have crapped his pants. Yeah. I thought Kyle Shanahan coached an awesome game. This is the best game that I've seen him coach on the biggest stage in football thus far, and it sucks for him that he has to hang his head again. This is number 3 for him, man, and it stings because his pops went through this same mess, man. It is the growing pains. It is the issue of winning a big game, man. I'll say it like this too, man. Bill Cowher was a guy that got heavily chastised for 20 long years that he couldn't get over the big game. First, it was the AFC title game, and it was that was the hump for him for a long time, that Pittsburgh could not get through the AFC title game. If it was Neil O'Donnell at the helm, if it was Cordell Stewart at the helm, if it was rookie Big Ben at the helm, Bill Cowher teams completely faltered until they didn't, until they finally got. It's going to take a lot of – it's the growing pains, man. Kyle Shanahan is going to win a Super Bowl one day. The 49ers went to a Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo and Brock Purdy, man. I think the 49ers can do anything. Maybe it's not going to be against Mahomes. I think Kyle Shanahan is one of the great NFL head coaches that I've had the privilege of watching in the sport. And just because he didn't come away with a victory, I'm not going to criticize the guy. I thought he coached a great game.
Thought he coached a really good game too, man. And as you said with that one play call, the NFL coaches who can actively add points to the scoreboard for you with just their mind, those are a rare breed. And I mean, we got to shout out the dudes who made those plays. Like Juwan Jennings hung in there under some pressure. Logan made a throw. Elite quarterback prospect, Juwan Jennings, for those of you who don't know, that's what he was coming out of high school. And then CMC, of course, makes the play to finish it off. But like, that's still an awesome play call. And I just think his ability to reverse the field for those defenses, his ability to use motion to get mismatches that he likes more offensively. And I thought that beyond that stuff that he can do pre-snap and with his creativity, just the overall approach to this game was pretty good. He hammered the run game. Like, there was just that little stretch in the second half where he throws on a couple first downs, and then you don't have a positive play, so all of a sudden you're working with 2nd and long instead of 2nd and 5, 2nd and 6. But I mean, we could say the exact same thing about Andy Reid, who we were just praising, because his play calling early in this game was not good. And he blew a timeout on 3rd and 1, and then they got stuffed anyways. Like, everybody is going to make a couple mistakes within the course of a game, but I thought that Shanahan was creative. I thought that he consistently got the ball in the hands of his best player, Christian McCaffrey. They had an advantage at the line of scrimmage. They ran the ball with McCaffrey 22 times, 31 times overall in this game. He was consistently involved with checkdowns. He had 8 catches for 80 yards. And by the way, went for it on 4th, down 10-13. So instead of just taking 3 and tying the game, he goes out there and gets you 6, draws up a great play call, is aggressive as you have to be against Patrick Mahomes, but you miss an extra point. If you don't miss an extra point, then you probably win this game if you're the Niners. Like, it just to me is a misattribution. It's people look at Kyle Shanahan and one time he threw the ball too much with a big lead in the Super Bowl and that's going to be his reputation forever. No, this is what I was saying, dude. It is so hard to win a Super Bowl without like one of those elite guys and without oftentimes just the best guy on the field. And he's never had the best guy on the field in one of these games. He's never had the best quarterback on the field. So it's hard when the guy opposite you is doing all-time special stuff that nobody else could.
Exactly. And the 3 boxes that the Niners needed to check, Carson, they checked 2 of 3 of them. Pressure, they got it. The turnover, they got it. They didn't get lucky. You have to, there's little bits of luck involved. And you think about the 2 biggest plays that cost the Niners in this game, that's what I'll attribute it to. It's the fumble on the muffed punt that leads directly to the touchdown, and it's the missed extra point by Jake Moody. That's life sometimes, man. You can do everything right in the book. You can play the perfect, most flawless football game. You can execute the game plan to perfection. And that's what I thought the Niners did. But they didn't get lucky. And sometimes that's what happens, man.
I do want to give a shout out to a couple of the Niners guys because Christian McCaffrey just put forth a Herculean effort in this game, man, and we gave like our favorite bets for the Super Bowl. I'm pissed that I didn't go with yards from scrimmage and I went with rushing yards because yards from scrimmage, his over hit. In fact, he had the most yards from scrimmage in a Super Bowl of anybody this century, man. Just one of the, I don't want to say all-time great running back seasons, okay, because that's hard. Guys just don't have the same volume of touches anymore, but I think on a touch-to-touch basis, like, he's as great as any dude that we've seen definitely since Prime AP. I think that when you talk about the all-around impact, the efficiency as a runner, both the agility and the speed in space, but also his ability to absorb contact, to run so physically, and being one of the best receiving backs we've ever seen. Like, dude, he maintains this level. He stays healthy. He is going to be in some of those all-time conversations. And really, he's the perfect modern running back. Right? He's not Eddie George. You're not going to give him 400 carries, but nobody does that. He can carry you on the ground. He physically this year for sure could take the toll of those 20 plus carries and grind a team down with the physicality and then also have 8 catches for 80 yards and a touchdown. I just thought he was phenomenal in this game. And the one fumble sucks, but also he was carrying them on that drive and was so fundamental to the success of this offense all year.
He's one of the greatest dual-threat running backs in NFL history. You think about the guys.
Is he top 2? Is he already top 2? Outside of Falk, has anybody been a better dual-threat running back?
The only other guy you can point to is Roger Craig because he has the first ever 1,000-yard season.
CMC Beta.
I agree with you. I think that I don't like dissing on the old guys. I think he is too. I think 3
You
is...
don't have to diss. You don't have to diss.
I think 3 is Roger Craig, and the number 4 is prime Le'Veon Bell. Man, that guy
And number 5
nasty.
is Larry Centers. And number 6 is David Johnson in the 2016 season.
And number 7's Danny Woodhead and Darren Sproles.
Yeah.
McCaffrey is, and I think to speak to it, I mean, I think his rushing impact is greater than Craig's. I think he's a better runner between the tackles and outside the tackles than Craig. And on that, oh my gosh, dude, we're giving out credit to the Niners. I don't mean this, and it sucks because it kind of gets wiped at the end because I think the Chiefs overwhelmed them. The Niners' offensive line played some of the best 3 quarters of football I've seen from a line. How much time they consistently bought Brock Purdy on a play-to-play basis. The Niners just look worn down at the end of this game, man. Like, the Chiefs got pressure late in this game. Chris Jones and Karlaftis played a much better fourth quarter. I thought the Niners' offensive line did a phenomenal job buying Purdy time, opening up lanes for Christian McCaffrey. And on the defensive side, everybody, Bosa, Chase Young, Eric Armstead, Javon Hargrave, all the big boys up front, Fred Warner. I thought they played an awesome football game, man. I mean, this really did. I mean, Carson, I came away from this saying the exact kind of thing that a lot of people said about the game. I felt like the Niners were the better team top to bottom. You know, I do.
They were.
And I mean, they are a stacked football team. But the Kansas City Chiefs have a great defense, and they got the best quarterback that's ever stepped foot on a football field. Like, the Niners are loaded, dude, and they played a really great football game. I do think these were the best 2 teams in football. You know, we asked earlier, in a previous episode, did the Ravens game feel like the Super Bowl? Did the Bills game feel like the Super Bowl? I think these were concretely the best 2 teams in football.
This felt like the Super Bowl, and this was the Super Bowl, and it was a pretty awesome Super Bowl. This was a legitimately great game, and I said earlier, one of my favorite Super Bowls, and I think one of the best. Like, I know that some people were ragging on this game early because there weren't a lot of points. I didn't care, dude. Like, the lack of offensive production early wasn't on the offenses to me. It was on great defense. It was on dudes getting pressure, dudes bottling up in coverage, dudes making awesome plays. We mentioned some of the stuff that we saw from Chiefs DBs. Like, that's fun. It's fun. You can have a great game that ends 19-19 at regulation like this one, and you can have a great game that was 38-35 like what we saw last year. Like, there are multiple ways to have a great football game, and I really enjoyed this one. And I thought that the tension throughout was so high. I do want to say one more thing about CMC, just because I was sort of trying to calm myself down and saying I won't say that this is one of the great running back seasons of all time. No. You know what, Logan? I will, because we've only ever 10 times seen a guy go for 2,000 yards from scrimmage and 20 touchdowns on 5 yards per attempt in a season. That's what CMC did. All right, you want to guess him? Go for it.
No, I was going to say, you should save this list, and we should do a TikTok later on this. This would be a blast.
All right. It's a pretty intuitive list. But anyways, he's alongside some special company, and that's the regular season on top of an unbelievable postseason run in which he ends with over 400 yards from scrimmage in just 3 games. Like, he's head and shoulders above everybody else in the league right now, and he is entering those all-time conversations. When it comes to this game, though, Logan, like, where does this rank to you among recent Super Bowls in terms of the caliber of the game?
Yeah, in recent memory, I'd probably say top 5. Recent memory, we're just going to...
Top 5 ever? Top 5 since 2000?
Standard ballpark. I was going to say since 2000.
Okay.
My favorite Super Bowl since 2000 was 2008. Obviously, my Steelers beat the Cardinals, but also you have 3 of the greatest plays in Super Bowl history. Santonio Holmes, his entire drive, and then the catch in the back of the end zone. James Harrison's 10 to 14 point swing at the end of the first half. The Steelers don't get it done without him. And then Larry Fitzgerald burning Ike Taylor and Troy Polamalu up the seam. I mean, just classic big Super Bowl moments on a big stage. The Malcolm Butler game, I hated watching that one because I wanted the Seahawks to win. But Patriots-Seahawks, Patriots-Falcons. I think Patriots-Eagles is a classic. I think Eagles Chiefs from last year's a classic. And then I think it's this one. Those are probably my top 6. I'm racking my brain right now.
Ravens-Niners was pretty damn good.
Actually, I was going to say
Giants-Pats Super Bowl number 1. You could argue both of them, but the 07 one.
there's been some really good ones. The '07 Super Bowl is a good poll. I'd say the Panthers-Patriots Super Bowl, the Rams-Patriots Super Bowls, both of those games end on game-winning field goals from Adam Vinatieri. Absolute classics. It's up there. It's top 10 for sure, I think, since 2000, maybe top 10 ever. It's a legitimately great game, and I'm glad you said that about the defenses. It's a great defensive, gritty battle, and it's not one of those where they're continuing to run up the score. It's like, because of that tension, because it was hard, the points mean something. Mm-hmm. You know, when Mahomes gets it to Cole at the end of the game, it means something. When Mahomes ties it up with 3 points to send it to OT, it's like, wow, it was a hard, gut-wrenching 3 points. That was tough to come by. And it wasn't shitty offense. It wasn't the offense is shitting the bed. It's great defense. Yeah. And that's why I think it's a great game. And again, this is the second Super Bowl in NFL history to go to overtime. We didn't have overtime in the first 49 years of the Super Bowl. It took us getting to Super Bowl 50 between, or no, it wasn't Super Bowl 50. It was Super Bowl 51. Yeah. Falcons-Pats.
Falcons-Pats.
Then we get this one. It's the second one ever to go to overtime. And it's the first one ever with the new rules of overtime. And I think that's a big component of it. So, yes, I think it is one of the greatest Super Bowls ever played, and I'm very pleased. This was very fun to watch.
I'm going to say it's top 10, and what the nostalgia merchants don't want you to know is that they actually hadn't dropped good Super Bowls until this century. The Super Bowl was a blowout every year, and there's really
13
only
straight
a few.
Years. I mean, there's a beatdown.
There's only a few, bro. You have Steelers-Cowboys in 78. You have a game in 1990 I don't want to talk about. You have Niners-Bengals, the Dwight Clark catch, and then outside of that, I mean, you had a whole lot of blowouts. So there have been a bunch of good ones since 2000. I think last year was probably a better Super Bowl overall because that was one of the most incredible displays of offense that I can think of seeing. You have to have the 28-3 comeback. You probably have to have the Malcolm Butler game. Ravens-Niners was pretty incredible. Outside of that, though, I mean, I think that this certainly stacks up against anybody else. Again, the tension throughout and how much every score meant really was phenomenal. This was an awesome, awesome football game and an end to an interesting season, like kind of a weird season, as we talked about, where it didn't feel throughout a lot of the year like that juggernaut emerged. And then maybe it was the Niners, but maybe Purdy was a flaw, and then it was the Ravens, and the Ravens got exposed, or at least got beaten by the Grim Reaper, as did everybody. My Buffalo Bills, those Miami Dolphins. Just an incredible testament to what Patrick Mahomes and this team did. You agree with me? He's got to be top 2 all time at this point. Are you still having anybody else over him?
Raw football impact, when you were looking at the offensive position, it's got to be Brady and Mahomes. I mean, there's just no... When he gets the ball, when there's a player that gets the ball with 2 minutes left and you have a sinking feeling in your stomach that you are about to get you're about to get decapitated. It's going to end. Yeah. You're going to be in tears. It's those two guys. I don't think there's anybody else. I mean, when you're looking at relative to position, and this is probably my Mount Rushmore at this point, it's Brady, it's Mahomes, it's Jerry Rice, and it's Lawrence Taylor. Who are your 4?
I think that's pretty consensus. I think that I would agree with that. Yeah.
And purely offensive, I mean, you can point to other quarterbacks, but to me, with Peyton Manning's consistent playoff shortcomings, Patrick Mahomes clears him. With Aaron Rodgers' inability to get over the hump, and I'm an Aaron Rodgers defender. I think Aaron Rodgers has objectively played great in the playoffs, and the fact that he hasn't been back to a Super Bowl since 2010 is not really his fault. But Mahomes has the second best playoff resume ever. You know what I mean? So that, to me, clears Rodgers and what he did in the regular season.
Yeah.
It's Mahomes and it's Brady, and that gap is getting closed. It's LeBron and Jordan to me, Carson. That's what we're looking at here.
Well, it's pretty different, though, because really Mahomes is closer to the Jordan in this debate. Because the question is, who do you think was higher at their peak? Well, it's to me clearly Mahomes in the NFL, and I would say Jordan in the NBA. Who has more longevity? Well, it's obviously Brady, and it's obviously LeBron. But Mahomes is not at the level of longevity or career accomplishments that a Michael Jordan is, and that's why it's not an apples-to-apples debate whatsoever. I mean, the guy's played 6 years, so that's why, to me, best to ever do it and greatest to ever do it are still a different conversation for him. But yeah, I think he's in a tier only with Tom Brady. Anything else you want to get off your chest about this game, Logan?
I think we covered it, man. This was a really fun NFL season, dude. And
yeah.
I don't know, man. Maybe we'll be back here again next year saying that the Chiefs have three-peated.
No, it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun when we can go through the narrative of, oh my God, can they survive without MVS, who they trade for a 7th-round pick? Can they do it? Yes, they can. My last 2 shout-outs, you mentioned Nick Bosa, but I thought that he generated so much pressure throughout this game. And I know we talked a little bit about Juwan Jennings, but, like, what a performance, dude, bro. Oh, my God.
He was my Super Bowl MVP through most of this game. And then if it was a Niner, I probably would have given it to McCaffrey by game's end if they had won.
Agreed.
But Jennings, for a while, I had as my Super Bowl MVP.
Such a playmaker, bro. Such a playmaker. I love that guy. Like, Theo tweeted out that he's a role player wide receiver that'll define a generation. I agree. Mohamed Sanu could never. Sanu maybe had the arm. He didn't have that playmaking knack that Juwan Jennings does. That guy fires me all the way up. Unfortunately, not enough for the Niners. I feel for all the Niners fans in my life. A lot of my family is Niners fans. Sorry, Pierre. Sorry, Ben. Sorry to all my Bay Area brethren who ended up losing. But what can you do? You lost to the Grim Reaper himself. So, with that, we sign off on an NFL season. Luckily, there's still a whole bunch of NFL history to look back on that we can do trivia about, and the NBA season is really kicking into gear. So if you want to hear more from us, you can find all of our full shows with video on the Nerd Sesh YouTube channel. You can also find video essays, video breakdowns that we do mostly on the NBA there, more intense film-oriented stuff. You can follow us across social media if you want to see our trivia content, clips from the show. That is at NerdSesh on Twitter and Instagram, at nerd_sesh on Twitter. You can join our Discord if you want to become part of our community, talk NFL, NBA. That link is at the link tree across our social media bios. And if you want a little bit of Nerd Sesh merch, we've got hats. Logan's wearing one. We've got shirts. We got hoodies. We got the flags behind us. All of that at thevolume.com. So with that, as always, appreciate you guys. Hope you enjoyed this NFL season. I've been Carson Breber.
I've been Logan Camden.
And this was Nerd Sesh.